Hello! Today you will be learning about how to evaluate online web resources for credibility, and we'll learn about the different criteria you should consider when looking at different web resources. So why is learning this important? As you know, the internet is home to millions of websites. However, even though there might be a wealth of information available out there, it does not mean that the information available is always reliable. In fact, online scholarly articles that may be reviewed by experts, most online sources are not reviewed, as almost anyone can publish information online. In fact, if you look below, you will see that so much information is published every day and so many users are online, and that is why it's important to know what information is reliable and what is not. Because so much information you see might not be appropriate for your coursework, it's important to evaluate the resources for credibility. To do so, there are many things to consider. Let's turn to the next slide to learn some more about the criteria that we look at when we evaluate web resources. When looking at a website, there are many things to consider. This includes authority, design, currency, and objectivity. Let's explore some of this criteria by looking at two websites. The first thing that we consider when looking at a web resource is the authority and credibility of the source. In other words, we ask questions such as, who is the author or organization that is publishing the website? Do they provide credentials or qualifications? What type of domain name is the website associated with? One thing that we can look at once we arrive on this website is the domain name. Since this website appears to be associated with the White House, we might assume that it would have a .gov domain names. Since .gov and .edu domain names, domains that are associated with governmental or educational institutions, can only be registered by those particular institutions, this gives those type of resources some level of credibility. However, since this resource is associated with a domain name whitehouse.net, this means that .net domain names, which can be registered by almost anyone, brings some issue of credibility to the particular resource. The second thing that we consider when looking at a website is the overall design. In other words, does the resource have a professional and consistent design? For example, if we look on this site, we will notice that while the website has a consistent navigation on the left-hand side, as well as a consistent theme, in the middle we will notice some odd text. In addition, if we refresh the page, we will notice an odd green color that changes as we refresh the page. A site that has a professional and consistent design throughout should maintain the same design on all pages, especially one that is supposed to have a professional appearance and presentation, something that usually goes along with educational and governmental institutions. The last thing that we consider when looking at a web resource is the overall currency and accuracy of the information. In other words, we ask, is the information on the source up to date? Are all the links functional? If we look on this website, we will see that some of the information seems to be out of date. For example, on the main page, we will notice under the picture that the website still recognizes and notes that the current president is George W. Bush. Something that is also seen on the contact page, if we click on contact and see the different persons whom you can contact. Another thing that we'll notice about this website is that there is no date provided on when it was last updated. That information, which is usually located on the bottom of each website, is nowhere to be found in this page. Lastly, if we look over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that many of the links that are provided on the menu are not functional. For example, if we click on either history or president, we are taken out of on a different page. For example, click on the president, takes us to a different website. The last thing that we consider when evaluating websites or web resources is the overall objectivity and purpose of the information provided. In other words, we ask, what is the purpose of the information? Is the information that's provided biased towards one particular perspective or viewpoint? For example, if we look on the website martinlutherking.org, we might think that because it's a website developed by organization that is dedicated to or honored for Martin Luther King's life. However, if we look closely, we will see that the information is actually biased and one-sided. For example, if we scroll over here on the left and see one of the links, such as suggested books, we will see that the books that are recommended are very are biased towards one perspective and very anti-Martin Luther King. Similarly, if we look under the link "The Truth About King," you'll notice that the information that is provided is also very biased and one-sided. Lastly, if we look back on the main page and examine who the author or the organization that sponsors it, we will see that at the bottom of the page it says hosted by Stormfront, which is a neo-Nazi group, a hate group, which suggests that this information is biased and not reliable. And that concludes the guide on evaluating the credibility of web resources. As you probably have realized, the first website that we looked at was not a legitimate website, rather a parody. Although this might not have been difficult to figure out, in most cases it will not be so clear-cut, and you will need to consider all the factors that we discussed. Remember, when looking at websites, always consider who the author is, what the purpose of the content is, and how current the information is. Knowing how to evaluate resources and identify credible resources is an important skill that will be necessary in your future courses. As always, if you are unsure about a source or have other questions, use the information provided below to reach out to the university library, who will be happy to help out.